Thank you. His Excellency, Sir Rodney Williams, Governor General of Antigua and Barbuda, the Honorable Gaston Brown, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Honorable Members of Parliament, the Honorable Jamal Pringle, Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Members of the Cabinet, and other members of the Government and Parliament of Antigua and Barbuda, Honorable Ambassadors, including Ambassador Lionel Hurst, and members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening.
Good. The privilege is mine to welcome you to this very special occasion to celebrate 30 years of friendship and brotherhood, 30 years of cooperation, and 30 years of solidarity. We are extremely grateful for your presence here this evening to celebrate 30 years of diplomatic relations between Antigua and Barbuda and the Republic of Cuba. Welcome to each and every one of you. I invite you to turn your attention to a brief video presentation.
Antes que todo fuera himnos y vítores, antes que todo sea negociaciones, hay un preludio espeso, desafinado, altísimos silencios de sin razones, y el miedo va goteando de los valientes, antes que los sudores y que la sangre, el instinto genuino que ya le advierte, permutar de destino se le hizo tarde. ¿Qué estoy haciendo aquí? Amando este país como a mí mismo.
This developing story at this hour, the nation's fight against COVID-19 has received a timely boost.
That's right, Sharon, because 25 nurses who recently arrived from Cuba began assisting on the front lines. The nurses were given the all clear to begin after having completed their quarantine.
De los infiernos, solo por los temores se filtra el alma, restos de quien al instante deshicieron, niños que tras el hambre se irán con calma, viejos jinetes del horror que han aprendido con la distancia anestesiarnos los disensos, con sensación de no es aquí, no es a mí, no son los míos, cabalgan sobre nuestro tedio. Después será, no es mi ciudad, luego será, no son mis hijos.
Cuban technicians continue to assist in strengthening the technical capacity of the Ministry of Works by serving in areas such as the government workshop, road program, and within the ministry's plans. Cuban linesmen have worked with APUA along with Cuban engineers in areas such as hydrology and water distribution, thereby contributing to the development of the country's infrastructure.
Vine a darle un beso al mundo y nada más.
I now invite His Excellency Sir Rodney Williams to deliver some congratulatory remarks. Let's welcome him as he comes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Honorable Prime Minister, honorable members of cabinet, honorable members of both houses of parliament, diplomats, members of the diplomatic corps, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is always a very difficult thing for me to follow protocol when I come to a function like this, because I don't know all who are here, and I don't go about looking at all the faces to know who is here and who is not. But however, I just wanted to greet you all and to say good evening. Good evening. And it is with great pleasure and pride that I join this gathering this evening to mark the significant milestone of 30 years of friendly bilateral relations between Antigua and Barbuda and the Republic of Cuba. This enduring partnership was built on a foundation of mutual respect and cooperation and shared values. I can speak to this reality from a personal and professional perspective, having had the opportunity during my tenure as Minister of Education, Culture and Sports to pay an official visit to the Republic of Cuba on about 2 occasions and to discuss beneficial initiatives for Antiguans and Barbudans in these vital sectors. The support and partnership extended by Cuba in areas such as education, healthcare, and human capacity building have been invaluable to our nation's development. As we welcome Ambassador His Excellency Sergio Manuel Martinez Gonzalez, the new resident ambassador of Cuba to Antigua and Barbuda, we want to reaffirm our commitment to strengthening and deepening the bonds of friendship and cooperation between our nations. Ambassador Gonzalez's pledge to not only maintain but also to improve our long-standing relationship is commendable. His commitment to expanding trade and economic development, exploring cultural exchanges, and enhancing bilateral cooperation aligns perfectly with our shared goals and aspirations. We stand in solidarity with Cuba, particularly in advocating for the removal of that financial blockade imposed by the United States of America. Cuba's contribution in building human capacity through education and healthcare personnel have been instrumental in the progress and growth of many nations in the Caribbean, in the African continent, and in other parts of the world. As we look towards the future, let us continue to work together, harnessing the strength of our partnership to address common challenges, promote regional integration, and advance shared interests on the international stage. Tonight, I say congratulations to Ambassador Gonzalez, to Cubans resident in Antigua and Barbuda, and to all those who have contributed to the success and longevity of our friendly relations with Cuba. May our friendship and cooperation continue to flourish in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sir Rodney. We now invite the Honorable Prime Minister, Gaston Brown, to offer his remarks. Let's welcome him as he comes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair Lady. I acknowledge our distinguished Governor General, Sir Rodney Williams, my colleague ministers, to include Senior Minister Sir Malwin Joseph, all of the other parliamentarians, to include the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Jamal Pringle, members of the Diplomatic Corps, to include Ambassador Gonzalez, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Good evening. Tonight, we're here to celebrate a very momentous occasion as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Antigua and Barbuda and the Republic of Cuba. And I say momentous from the standpoint that Antigua and Barbuda and the Republic of Cuba enjoy very strong and robust relations. I would admit that the relationship perhaps should have started at least several years prior when we attained independence. However, in 1994, we established formal diplomatic relations with Cuba, and it was our former leader, national hero, Sylvester Bird, who actually commenced diplomatic relations with the Republic of Cuba. And at that time, the late Fidel Castro was the president of Cuba. The relationship obviously would have grown. Subsequently, you would have had former Prime Minister Baldwin Spencer, now myself, would have helped to nurture that relationship to the extent it is one of our closest, one of our most celebrated diplomatic relations. Cuba and Antigua and Barbuda, they share a number of values. So, for example, we have mutual respect for each other and for other states, respect the sovereignty of states, and we believe in the principles of non-interference and certainly non-intervention in the affairs of states. Cuba has been very benevolent as well, and is a country that has done a significant amount of global good for a number of countries, despite its own problems, despite its own limited resources. And we are always very grateful and very appreciative of the support that we get from Cuba, because they continue to give from the little that they have. We all know of Cuba's contribution towards the development of Antigua and Barbuda, perhaps most notably their contributions in healthcare and education. In fact, our healthcare system, for the most part, has been supplemented and in a very significant way by Cuban doctors and nurses and other specialists. And, we continue to celebrate with gratitude the contribution that Cuba made during the period of COVID, when other countries were literally precluding their expertise and certainly the equipment and PPEs from being used abroad to fight COVID, which, as you know, was extremely menacing at the time. Notwithstanding, Cuba was able to make a number of healthcare professionals available to Antigua and Barbuda from its Henry Reeve specialist team. And they arrived during the period of COVID, and I have no doubt that their presence here would have helped to strengthen our own local healthcare practitioners, who at the time obviously were very fearful of COVID. So I'm pretty sure that based on their direct and indirect contributions, that they would have assisted us in saving lives and obviously keeping our people healthy. So for that, we're eternally grateful. Cuba's contribution to education is well known. We continue to benefit from a significant amount of scholarships. And to date, we have had over 300 individuals who have had scholarships from Cuba. And I should take the opportunity to add that these scholarships actually predated the establishment of diplomatic relations between Cuba and Antigua and Barbuda. And I certainly want to thank the members of the ACLM organization that were instrumental in literally educating our people. And at a time too when scholarships are very difficult to get. I mean, first of all, at that time during our period of development, we didn't have the resources to send many people abroad to training medicine and other disciplines. And Cuba stepped up at that time, even before we had formal diplomatic relations. So Cuba has been making a significant contribution towards the development of our country for decades. And for that, we're eternally grateful. And I want to state here that the bonds of friendship between Antigua and Barbuda and the Republic of Cuba, those bonds are indestructible. They're indissoluble. They are bonds of friendship that will continue to grow from strength to strength, because my administration is committed to ensure that we continue to strengthen this bilateral relationship and also to continue to stand in solidarity with Cuba on the issue of the blockade, the financial, economic and commercial blockade. We continue to stand against that decision of the United States. In fact, what they're doing, they are in essence plunging innocent Cuban people into poverty, undermining the development of Cuba. And we think it's a most senseless act, and certainly a wicked one, in which they are literally undermining the Cuban civilization. And we continue to advocate for them to lift that embargo against Cuba, and Cuba can continue to rely on Antigua and Barbuda as a sustaining friend that will continue to fight in the international forum to ensure that that embargo is lifted. So as we celebrate this very important relationship, I say on the part of all Antiguans and Barbudans that we will continue to support Cuba. We'll support Cuba not only within the regional and hemispheric institutions, but within the various global institutions. Cuba can continue to expect our cooperation or rely on our cooperation on many issues affecting both Cuba, Antigua and Barbuda, and certainly other small island states within the region and globally. Again, we are very grateful in the way in which this relationship has developed, and we feel sure that this relationship will continue to grow from strength to strength. So I end by saying, long live the government and people of Cuba, and long live the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda. Cheers.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Our next speaker was the actual signatory to the agreement that established diplomatic relations between both countries. So let us welcome Ambassador Lionel Hurst to give his remarks.
Thank you ever so kindly, Madam Chairperson. Good evening, Governor General. Good evening, Prime Minister, other ministers of the government, including the Honorable Morgan Joseph and the Honorable Mr. Darrell Matthew, whom I encountered earlier. And welcome also, maybe I should not be welcoming you, but I welcome you anyway, to the home of a friend, a dear friend in Cuba and in Ambassador Martinez. Bienvenido en todos. Muchísimas gracias por su invitación. Thank you very much. I learned my Spanish in the Dominican Republic. A great place to learn lots of things. And, well, let me begin by saying that Vere Cornwall Bird was the first Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, and he served until 1994. Following the elections of 1994, Vere Cornwall Bird stepped down, and the Honorable Lester Bird became Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda. Within 2 weeks, Prime Minister Lester Bird instructed me, at that time our ambassador to the UN, to make the arrangements for the establishment of diplomatic relations between Antigua and Barbuda and Cuba. Cuba, he said, was a genuine Caribbean partner and made up of genuine Caribbean people, and Antigua and Barbuda could not follow the dictates of any other country or any other interest but its own. And though Barbados, Jamaica, and Guyana had established diplomatic relations with Cuba in 1972, Antigua and Barbuda, not having gained its independence until 1981, and having had Vere Cornwall Bird as its leader for the first 13 years following independence, chose the second Prime Minister to do the job. That is, he felt genuinely connected to the Cuban Revolution, and he knew that Cuba represented a new stage in the development and in the civilization of the Caribbean people. And he instructed me to sit and to arrange for the establishment of diplomatic relations between Cuba and Antigua and Barbuda. And I want to tell you, even though we take instructions as diplomats, we also take great pleasure when we know that what we're doing is on the right side of history. And establishing diplomatic relations with Cuba has not only been good for Cuba, it has also been good for Antigua and Barbuda. And there was never a moment when the opportunity arose at the United Nations for Antigua and Barbuda to join more than 150 countries. At the time, it may have been about 175 nations that were members of the United Nations, but we took great pleasure in joining more than 100 nations in condemning the embargo which the United States had imposed upon Cuba. In my first visit to Cuba, to attend a Congress on crime, I had the great pleasure of meeting the El Supremo, the leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro Ruiz. And I told him that Vere Cornwall Bird had been essentially in office as the leader of the Antigua and Barbuda people since 1951, when we had a constitutional change. Impossible, he said. Impossible. I have been the only Caribbean leader who's been around since 1959. So I explained to him the history of the trade union movement in Antigua and Barbuda and its place in lifting the Antigua and Barbuda people out of the poverty that was the way we lived. And Fidel Castro asked me, what can Antigua and Barbuda learn from Cuba that you could possibly help to change, that we could possibly help to change? And I told him about Antigua being a desert and very little rainfall. At that time, we were having maybe 30 inches of rain a year. We moved from 39 to 30, we're now down to about 21 inches of rain a year. And we had to change that. And he said, I will take you to see the waterworks in Cuba. And you know, on one side of the maestro, or one side of the mountains, there is a lot of rain. And on the other side, there's very little rain. And the Cubans had constructed great big tunnels that took the stored water from one side over to the other side. Well, there were some lessons which we did learn from the Cuban experience, but it's the magic, the engineering skill, the thought that went into turning what would have been a disaster for Cuba had it not done some of these things, and they were done under the Cuban Revolution. They weren't done before. So we have learned many things from Cuba, and above all, we are so thankful for the number of scholarships and other kinds of training opportunities that the Cuban Revolution provided for Antigua and Barbuda. So, viva Cuba! Viva la Revolución! And long live the friendship between Antigua and Barbuda and the Republic of Cuba. God bless. Good night.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurst. Our final speaker is the Ambassador of the Republic of Cuba to Antigua and Barbuda, Ambassador Sergio Martinez. Let's welcome him, please.
I get it all, so I have to get my glasses. His Excellency Sir Ronan Williams, Governor General of Antigua and Barbuda, Honorable Gaston Brown, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Honorable Member of the Cabinet and other members of the government and parliaments of Antigua and Barbuda, Honorable Ambassadors and representatives of the Diplomatic Corps, Antiguan brothers, ladies and gentlemen. On April 6, we commemorate 30 years in which the governments of Antigua and Barbuda and the Republic of Cuba established diplomatic relations, which have been strengthened day by day to constitute what is today an example of what two people and governments can achieve on the basis of mutual respect, fraternal collaboration, and the defense of the purest ideals of sovereignty and independence. Antigua and Barbuda has always shown braveness and solidarity in supporting the fight of the Cuban people against the criminal and genocidal economic, financial, and commercial blockade that the U.S. government has imposed against Cuba for more than 60 years, and more recently, against the unjust and arbitrary inclusion of my country in the spurious list of terrorist countries. Antigua and Barbuda has maintained a vertical attitude in defense of Cuba in all international forums in favor of the resolutions against the blockade of Cuba and in the return of the illegally occupied territory of the Guantanamo naval base. Through these years, hundreds of Cubans have provided their collaboration in sectors such as healthcare and public works in Antigua and Barbuda. More than 300 young people have graduated from Cuban universities in different specialties of medical science, engineering, pedagogy, among others, children. From this exchange, families and ties have also been formed between our people which make our brotherhood even more indestructible. You could say that like the large cliff that waves some of our coast, or the beautiful hills that our landscape have, resistant to all tests of time and events of nature, this is and will forever be an indestructible relation of brotherhood and solidarity between the people and government of Antigua and Barbuda and Cuba. I would like to take the advantage of this opportunity to once again reiterate that Antigua and Barbuda can always count on the solidarity and the support of its Cuban brothers in whatever they may need. As we said in Cuba, we do not provide what we have left over, but we share what we have. As Caribbean people facing similar changes, we share the same dream of development and prosperity. Today is a time of celebration for everything achieved in this period, but also a time of reflection on how we can continue to strengthen our tie of friendship and solidarity, collaboration, integration, and the current links in the economic and commercial field for the mutual benefit of our people. Let us continue working with the conviction that on this basis we will achieve an increasingly brighter and prosperous future for our people. Long life to the eternal brotherhood between Antigua and Barbuda and Cuba. Thank you very much. Well, my friend, thank you all for coming, and I invite you to have a drink, enjoy the Cuban food, and enjoy this wonderful and pleasant evening. Thank you. Thank you.